I never expected to step outside one Tuesday morning at 6:30 and find an immaculate, blindingly white vinyl fence running straight through the middle of my cattle pasture. 8 feet high, topped with decorative lattice, and accessorized with a laminated sign that declared, "Private property, HOA enforced." On the wrong side of it stood my prize bull, Ferdinand, staring at me like I'd suddenly abandoned him to suburbia. The 40 acres my grandfather left me were now bisected like a giant layer cake. And waiting by the fence, clipboard in hand and smugness radiating like cheap perfume, was Patricia Garrison, freshly crowned president of the Rosewood Heights Homeowners Association. She wore a powder blue pantsuit that could have been stolen from a 1987 Sears catalog, and her hair was teased so aggressively it could have its own weather pattern. When I walked over in my flannel and work boots, coffee mug in hand, she raised her palm like she was directing traffic. "You're trespassing on HOA property," she barked, in a voice sharp enough to peel paint off a tractor. I blinked at her. "Ma'am, this is my ranch. I've owned it for 15 years. Patricia clicked her pen like she was signing a Broadway contract. "Not this section. The HOA board voted unanimously to annex it for our community garden and meditation retreat. Let me back up. My name's Jake Morrison, and I run Morrison Ranch, a working cattle operation next to, but not part of, the Rosewood Heights subdivision. Not in their HOA, not in their tax district, not even in their zip code. My grandfather bought this land decades ago, and I've been raising cattle and cutting hay ever since. The idea of a suburban HOA trying to absorb part of it would have had him rising from the grave with a shotgun in hand." Patricia had only been in town 6 months, but in that short time, she staged what neighbors now call the Great Board Coup. Promising beautification and increased property values, she convinced half the subdivision she was Martha Stewart with a law degree. The other half just didn't show up to vote. Soon she was trying to regulate everything within shouting distance. Unfortunately, that included me. First, she mailed me letters on official HOA stationery, even though I'm not under her jurisdiction. One suggested I repaint my barn in a tasteful neutral. Another complained about the offensive rural odors. The third demanded I remove my livestock for creating, quote, "an unprofessional ambience." Then it got stranger. She stood by my fence at dawn with a decibel meter, insisting my non-existent roosters violated noise ordinances. She hired a photographer to document my cows as visual pollution. She even started a petition to have my land declared a public nuisance. That one crashed and burned. Most townsfolk have been buying beef from my family for generations, and one of the first doors she knocked on belonged to my cousin Linda. When I ignored her antics, Patricia escalated. She called the county claiming my barn was an illegal commercial facility. She phoned animal control to complain about excessive mooing. When none of that stuck, she went nuclear, holding a late-night emergency board meeting with her 2 allies where they voted to expand HOA boundaries. The next morning, she hired a Craigslist contractor to slap up that vinyl monstrosity while I was at the farmer's market. When I told her to tear it down, she actually handed me a manila folder labeled "Cease and Desist." According to her, I owed $500 per day in fines for interfering with lawful HOA business. That's when I drove down to the county clerk's office. Betty, who has known my family forever, looked at my property records and frowned. "Jake, there haven't been any changes here since your granddad bought that extra 5 acres in 1973. But Patricia had filed a gem, a forged deed supposedly signed by me, granting land to the HOA. The signature looked like someone traced it off a birthday card using their left hand while blindfolded. Betty made copies and told me to head straight to the sheriff. Deputy Harrison was very interested. Forging property records, turns out, is a felony. Meanwhile, I set up trail cameras. Sure enough, Patricia was parading subdivision residents through my field, charging $100 consultation fees to assign garden plots. She'd already collected over $3,000. Her sales pitch included telling people I was a squatter who'd been caught smuggling exotic animals, or in one version, growing illicit crops between my hay bales. Deputy Harrison later discovered she'd pulled this trick before. In New Jersey, she tried to annex a neighbor's pool house. In Delaware, she attempted to claim a historic cemetery as common grounds. Now, she'd added rural Texas to her resume. The sheriff's office taped off the fence as a crime scene, which Patricia tried to replace with pastel ribbon she called the HOA-approved boundary markers. She even attempted to host a picnic on what she dubbed her meditation meadow. The county surveyor soon confirmed what was obvious. The fence sat 47 feet inside my property, fencing off nearly 2 acres. So I brought in my tractor and started yanking out posts. Patricia stood in the road with a megaphone, live streaming the illegal demolition on Facebook. Her caption, "Criminal Destroys Community Project." Unfortunately for her, the comments were mostly neighbors asking why she'd built it on private property in the first place. The next HOA meeting had to be moved to the school gym to handle the crowd. Patricia came armed with a 40-slide PowerPoint titled, "Defending Our Expansion Rights." She showed graphs proving how my stolen land would raise home values, clip art renderings of her garden sanctuary, and even quoted expert testimony from Robert Henderson, a used car salesman cousin of hers in Tampa. Well, I got the mic. I didn't need fancy slides. I held up the forged deed, showed the real survey maps, and played security footage of her charging residents for stolen dirt. Then Deputy Harrison stood and announced she was facing charges of fraud, forgery, attempted grand theft, and trespassing. The room exploded. Patricia tried to gavel for order, but someone had already motioned to remove her from a board. The vote, 73-1. She was the lone yes for herself. As deputies cuffed her, Patricia had a meltdown worthy of reality TV. She wailed that I destroyed her vision, accused the crowd of being jealous, and insisted the fence was actually avant-garde land art, too sophisticated for our small-town minds. The judge didn't buy it. She was convicted on all counts, sentenced to 3 years, likely serving 18 months with good behavior, and ordered to pay $40,000 restitution for fence removal, survey costs, and legal fees.